Okay, in this video, I wanted to provide some preparation for the midterm exam for next week. Hopefully you've done all the readings. If you have not, then you want to do that this week and make sure that you're taking notes and that you're ready to sit down and take the exam. This video will help you prepare and to focus on kind of the key points and give you a broad overview of what you need to be able to do. The exam is open, so you'll have the entire week to complete it. It's best if you try to get it done in one sitting. So make sure you have all your notes and everything ready. You want to make sure you're using your own words and try to remember that this is 20% of your total grade. It's also going to be good preparation for the final exam. There is a few different resources that I've provided. So if you're just having trouble, basically understanding more basic concepts, maybe things that you didn't quite pick up in high school, or if you're new to this country, right, you'll want to go to this crash course on YouTube and just kind of review some of those general principles. If you want a textbook, there's a free textbook available. I think you have to give them your email if you want to try and just get these background kind of concepts. That said, there's three things that you can do to get your notes organized, and that's to make sure that in relation to each reading that you have a proposition about U.S. politics. You're making a general rule or a summary about what you think U.S. politics is. So again, try really hard. It's not about taking sides. That's not what U.S. government class is about. It's about what does this say about the political system. Then you need to make sure that you have support for that proposition. So it's not enough just to have an opinion. You need to be able to have evidence that you're getting from the readings. And then finally, there needs to be a logical conclusion for what that means for participatory politics. Who are you including? Who are you excluding? Who has the benefit? Who has the detriment? Lots of different issues can come up, so I'll just kind of leave it there. But the idea here is that proposition leads to the support leads to the logical conclusion. Again, if that's still difficult for you, then you want to make sure you do some of this basic concept reading or watch the videos. Now, in week one, I've kind of laid this out for you. So there's proposition, support, and then conclusion. And so you want to just go back and make sure that you understand these three concepts as it relates to the reading. And that really was about how the business community and the human rights community are in contradiction or they're clashing with each other. And so you've got corporations, international corporations going into Guatemala, and Guatemala is allowing them to come in. At the same time, they're not allowing human beings to come in. So you see this kind of contradiction where corporations don't have to worry about immigration or nationality laws, and then human rights, then suddenly they say, no, we want to use sovereignty. We're not going to let people in. You see the same thing going on now in the Ukrainian conflict. Some countries are accepting refugees, others are not. And so meanwhile, the weapons and the goods, go without any checking of nationality. And so you've got this contradiction here. So you want to think about who does that tend to hurt? It tends to hurt the people who have the least representation. So the local Mayan community in Guatemala is not represented in politics. And so they're the ones who really bear the burden of this dilemma and this contradiction. So just something that happens all over the world happens in the United States. The point there is that the logical conclusion is that there is a historical process that says that law should represent the people, but on the other hand, it can also exclude the people in a common application. So just to understand that contradiction is the main point. In week two, you're really seeing two things come into contrast. So you have this dilemma that we have in this country around the concept of critical race theory and whether people should understand the historical legacy of slavery and how it affects common legislation and issues today. One huge issue is how broken windows policing and really just policing in general and the mass incarceration system affect people of color. So you could also do some research and just see of the states that are banning critical race theory, go ahead and look at their prison populations and seeing what portion of those are Latin and Black men. And you'll see that there's a correlation. So places that are explicitly racist don't really want to talk about racism. Places that have more equality are more comfortable talking about racism. And so you want to see how this form of resistance through theory and through writing is being appreciated in the political system. That's really, again, the main point. For week 3, you're now seeing how this comes together in the more radical wings of both of the political parties. So on the left hand, or the left hand side, on the left side of the Democrats, you've got the defund the police narrative and Black Lives Matters, and that's really looking to deconstruct the system and is doing that through mass protest. The same event occurred with the insurrectionists who are using the Stop the Steal and You Will Not Replace Us hashtags, and they represent the radical or the right extremism on the right. And so what you really need to see is, again, not taking sides of either of these issues, but to understand how polar opposite they are. And when politics gets this opposite, that is the recipe for violence. So it's not that each of the groups are violent. Many of you struggled with this in your papers. That's not the issue. The issue is that the extremes are so far apart that there's not really any room for political compromise. That's what leads to violence. This is not a new scenario. This has happened throughout history over and over and over again. The key is that politics is supposed to keep things towards the middle. It's supposed to keep people in the ability to compromise. So as you see that not working, as you see that starting to break down, that's when you should be suspicious or skeptical or fearful that violence is around the corner. And that's literally what happened at the insurrection. And to a very limited extent, you saw that with the police reaction to some of the looting during the Black Lives Matter protests, which in both cases, right, you've got extreme elements coming out of the larger movements. And that's really when it comes into contact with the police, whether it's the insurrectionists or whether it's the looters that were attending the march. And so in both cases, you really have rioting and looting, not because of the main purpose of the groups, but because of the conflict, the contrast, as people are coming into conflict with one another. And so you want to think about, what does that say about the politics of today? Now, in the readings that I asked you to after that, I'm really testing to see, can you take this logic, can you take this new way of thinking about the readings? And again, not defending sides. You're not picking which reading you like more. It's about, are you able to apply critical analysis? And so these are the steps you need to be able to do in those readings. You need to identify your major premise. Okay, what is it you're trying to say about politics? You have to identify the source of the information. Where is it coming from? What's the evidence? Then you want to establish what's called a minor premise. So what is the proposition that then comes out of that evidence? Now, is that in line? Is that similar? Is it building upon your original proposition, the statement that you have about politics? And then what's the necessary consequence? What's the conclusion that's going to follow from that way of thinking? And so I gave you really two things that are in contrast. You've got the Patriot Act and then over 100 years worth of civil rights legislation. So on one side, you have a group of people who is trying to have greater control over the individual lives of people in society. And then you have the resistance pushing back and saying, we want a more social government and we want more social rights. And so you've got this kind of contrast here. So again, you want to be able to identify the proposition, your support for the proposition, and then the logical conclusion, and to see these in contrast. For Gitlow versus New York, this is now taking that big picture contradiction between social responsibility and individual responsibility, the right of the state to interfere into individuals' lives, and then the right of people to push back against the government. And you see this in a actual case. And so you want to think about, what does this case have to say about U.S. politics, not just in the early 1900s, but also what does it say about politics today? And then what's your support for that proposition using the evidence from the case? And then what's the logical conclusion for participatory politics? One thing you might think about is whether people are more or less likely to take a stand against the government now that this case and the consequences that from the Patriot Act have brought forth. You want to think about what that says about democracy. What does that say about the political system? And keep in mind that Thomas Jefferson thought that freedom of the press, freedom of speech should never be limited. So you've got a great difference from the forming of the country to today, and you want to think about how people's attitudes are formed by these cases and the legislation, and what are they going to do then in the political realm. And then I want to give you just a couple of examples of the type of questions you'll be asked. So on the right hand side here, I give you a visual. It gives you kind of a concept in visual form, and then I give you a task and ask you to explain that and apply it to a political position or a legal case. Another thing I'll do is I'll give you see if you can do the proposition. So I give you a couple words here, 3 words, and then you put together a statement using your own words that shows me that you understand how to use those words. And so I gave you a list of those terms that's in the preparation document that you can kind of think about and practice with. And so again, you'll either be identifying them in a multiple choice, or you'll be explaining them in a long answer. And then finally, you're going to have a reflection. So I'm going to give you a new piece of information that's going to be like it's a very short reading, but it's a new reading. And then I'm trying to see if you can use the materials and the things that you've learned in this class up to this point. Can you use them in a new way? So can you apply your critical analysis into a new circumstance? And so an A answer on this section will be that you are using the course materials, that you're showing me you know how to use them, that you're writing in complete sentences, and that you understand the concepts, and that you refer to the intersectionality of race, gender, and class discrimination, and show how that applies in the political arena. And then you can read the other columns here. Nearly there is kind of you're getting there, but you haven't quite used all of intersectionality. You're probably only referring to race or gender or class, and you haven't really quite seen how that's a system. Getting better means that it's about a C answer. It's that you're kind of referring to broad scale discrimination or bad people or general injustice, but you're really not being specific, and you're not really showing me that you understand the concepts as they apply to the political system. So you're still probably trying to take sides. You're still working on that. You haven't quite turned the corner to critical analysis. And then finally, not a great answer on this one will be you're just kind of giving your opinion. You haven't really shown me that you understood any of the course content, and you're not able to critically analyze it. And so you're still kind of giving these kind of general platitudes like we should all be equal, or some people are bad, or things will never change, or all these things that really mean nothing. And so you're just really not applying the course content. And so that's a D. That would really need show me that you're really got a ways to go before you're going to be able to pass this class. And so that's good advice probably for all of the answers, but this is the one I'll be specifically applying this rubric. So again, right, I hope this video is just helpful to get you thinking about what you need to do to prepare all week. You'll have the full week to complete the midterm exam. I really want everyone to do as well as they can. It's open book. Main thing is use your own words, right? Don't copy and paste. It'll be incredibly obvious if you do, and I'll have to give you an F. And so please just try to show me where you're at. This exam will be graded on a curve, meaning that the highest answer will set like the A, right, and so forth. So, if everybody's struggling, then you'll do a little bit better overall. So it's not going to be a harsh number. I'm going to try to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm mostly saying, are you struggling? Are you working hard to try to understand these concepts? And can you apply them? So you really want to take your time and do a good job and make sure you have good notes on the readings.